In conclusion, I think it's important to consider the following three truths regarding control. The first truth regarding control is that the more control you impose, the less control you have. For example, let's assume that you're dealing with the purchasing process in a large corporate organization that requires 4 signatures before a particular item can be purchased. So put yourself in the shoes of signatory number 4. You can imagine what this person's in-tray looks like, because he's basically got 3 other people's work gets funneled to him. And that work can only progress once he's signed it off. If at the end of a busy day he's confronted by a massive pile of stuff to wade through, what he's probably going to do is he's going to assume that if signatory number 3 has signed, it's okay for him to sign. The problem with this, however, is that if signatory number 3 is not in a dissimilar place. He looks at the fact that signatory number 2 has signed, and that signatory number 4 will check it as well. So he'll then just sign. Which means to say, every time you add a signatory, you create more assumptions that somebody else has checked. In other words, every time you impose a control, you shift accountability for what's being done from the person who's doing it to the person who's controlling it. And the effect over a period of time is that your point of control actually moves further and further away from where the tire hits the road. And actually you therefore have less control. The second truth about control is that it wastes value. And a metaphor for this is to think about the relationship between the accelerator and the brake in a car. It is the nature of the brake to frustrate movement that's already been initiated. That's in a sense why we have a brake, and that's why brakes are valuable things. A car without a brake is a dangerous thing. So this suggests, therefore, that we're not saying that there isn't a role for control. It's very important sometimes to waste value. It's very important to bleed value off the system, because otherwise you have a catastrophe. Control only becomes problematic if you consider the implication with regard to efficiency. Because every time you impose a control, what you're actually doing is you're introducing friction and inertia in the system. You're wasting energy that's already been initiated. Each control that gets imposed, in the first instance, has to be administered by somebody, and that person's time is valuable, costs money. And secondly, it actually retards the execution of the job. You're putting another point of frustration between the need that the job is supposed to address and the job being done. The cumulative effect over time can actually be quite life-threatening particularly in view of the fact that control is the organizational equivalent of weed. And what I mean by this is sort of weeds in the garden. What's true about weeds is that nobody plants them. They're ambient. And in a sense, control is like that. Control is ambient in organizations because the average boss runs his business consistent with the let's not witch hunt syndrome, which basically means whenever there's a problem, he doesn't try and find out who's accountable. What he does is he imposes another control, which suggests that every time something goes wrong, it's an opportunity for the business to grow yet another control. In a sense, you don't have to worry about getting control in, because it finds its own way in spontaneously, because all over the organization at any given point in time, somebody is exercising the let's not witch hunt syndrome as a response to an exception. And because it's the nature of the universe to roll exceptions at us, in a sense, organizations spontaneously grow controls over a period of time. The challenge isn't to put the controls in, the challenge is to consistently take them out. If we don't consistently take them out, eventually we create the conditions where there's so much waste of value and there's so much frustration to our business process that our business becomes completely unresponsive to markets and customer requirements, and as a result, the viability of our business is threatened. What I've experienced in the past is when the business hits that point, what normally happens is the CEO gets fired and he gets replaced by a new CEO who within a week makes the conclusion that most of the work that's being done in the business actually has the character of the business working on itself. In other words, most of the work that's being done is being done by people who are checking and controlling the work of other people. And secondly, this has created the conditions where the business has lost its market focus. And as a result, the opposition is now wooing the customer. A very likely response to this scenario is that the CEO hires the services of a business process reengineering consultancy. And business process reengineering consultancies all have a very similar process model for their work. It's a two-step model. The first step is diagnostic, where they establish the opportunity, and the second step is remedial, in other words, where they go and fix the organization, restructure the organization. The diagnostic piece is normally done as cheaply as they can, because obviously they're trying to hook a project. And it's very often delivered, in my experience, in a brown paper presentation in the boardroom, where the board gets invited into the boardroom and the chief salesperson of the consultancy speaks the board through the opportunity, which is displayed on brown papers that are pasted on the boardroom walls. By the time this person has spoken the board through the opportunity, in a sense the decision's been made, because it's a no-brainer. The amount of money that they can save is genuinely staggering. And when somebody asks what the price of the opportunity is, it's always a fraction, which basically means the decision gets taken within a few minutes. And as a result, contracts are signed, the chief sales guy of the consultancy leaves the boardroom, and the chief ops guy comes in, who opens a massive briefcase with a huge executioner's axe and starts in the boardroom. Anybody's head, he just takes a head. And then he storms out the boardroom, and it's just a horrifying experience of cut, chop, and hack as he storms down the corridor. When he's finished storming down the corridor, which could take a couple of months, he then reconstructs the organization in reverse, puts the organization in plaster of Paris. It's sort of the intensive care part of the process. If you open a cupboard, 4 consultants will fall out. They then cut the plaster of Paris off, and you have a new organization, which basically means the logic that underlies any business process re-engineering exercise is freeze, defreeze, refreeze. An organization is a frozen crystalline structure. If you want to change it, you've got to smash it, you've got to reorganize it, refreeze it, and then you have a new organization. Now let's assume you're dealing with a BPR crowd who knew what they were doing. So you were in this really inefficient place. They put you through this horrendous night of the long knives, and they created a condition where 6 months later, every single task that gets done in the organization is poetry in motion. There's a direct line of sight between the job that's being done and the customer requirement. They then leave. But because we don't understand the implication of the relationship between accountability and control, on day 2 somebody makes a mistake and his boss says to him, listen, you idiot, next time check with me. So there's already a new controls been introduced into the process. On day 3, the market moves without asking you for permission. On day 4, the idiot makes a mistake again. And this time the boss says, listen, next time you first sign this form and send it to me for signature before the job's going to happen. Which basically means, because we don't address the issue of accountability and the let's not witch hunt syndrome, the moment you've fixed your organization in a business process re-engineering exercise, the organization's immediately starting to go out of alignment. And that then continues to happen until we require yet another business process re-engineering exercise 5 years later, and corporates could go through multiple experiences of this until they finally hemorrhage themselves to death, all at the hands of the BPR consulting industry.